Hey everyone, it's Marcy Marcusa, host of This is Manitoba. Now, we have a great episode for you today, but I do want to take a second first and let you know that we are excited to have you along with us in the podcast. If it's your first time, welcome. We have a new episode every week, and we hope you don't want to miss it. So to not miss it, take a moment to hit follow on your favorite podcast app. This is Manitoba connects you to the stories everyone's talking about in our province, like how a plan to mine for sand in Manitoba became embroiled in politics. So let's get to that.
There's nothing in your procedures manual that says you cannot take questions from the floor.
Whatever the hell they want with me,
right.
They can hang me for all I care. I am going to fight this to the end. Till the day I die.
You came to my house, asked for my support.
Exactly.
That was the scene at a town hall in Oakbank in the fall of 2023. Residents turned up to a council meeting held by the arm of Springfield to express anger over proposed sand mining in their community. Things got so heated that the RCMP were called, and they advised officials to shut down the session early. Believe it or not, it has been nearly a decade since Sio Silica literally staked its first claims in southern Manitoba. The Alberta-based company was searching for sand deposits. Now, initially, they hoped to find a source for something called proppant. That's a material that's used to facilitate oil extraction, and then it can be sold to the oil and gas industry for fracking. What followed has been a long and winding saga for residents in southeastern Manitoba especially, Sio Silica executives, and for stakeholders. It's also become a battleground for political intrigue. As mentioned, I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba. Today, we are digging into the story of Sio Silica's plans for this project and how they've been received. And then we're going to get to the latest political turmoil that has unfolded around this proposal. But first, it's worth a refresher. What is this project exactly? And why is it so controversial? To answer those questions, we have to go back to May of 2023. That's when Sio Silica was pursuing its first plan. The Conservatives at that time were still leading the province under Heather Stephenson. And what started out as a search for fracking materials evolves into a plan centered around solar power, as industries worldwide look to move away from burning oil and gas to other forms of energy. It turns out that in Manitoba, we have a resource that you don't find everywhere else. CBC's Bartley Kives has been following this story for years. He shared the details of that first proposal, and I started out by asking him what exactly Sio Silica is looking for.
Ultra pure crystalline quartz, Marcy. Basically, that's very fine sand that would make for the most beautiful beach, but it's not on a beach. The silica's down below the surface. It's highly desirable because it's 99.85% pure, perfect for making solar paddles, high-tech batteries, and maybe even semiconductors and nanotech. Sio Silica's a Calgary company, and they want to mine what they call this critical mineral. Brent Bullen, the company's chief operating officer, explains the demand.
Low iron sand is required to produce a low iron panel. That gives a solar panel 12% more efficiency, just because of the sand qualities alone. The sand that we have, it's the elements that are left. So 99.9 is very respectable in purity. It's very high. But it's what you don't have in the sand that matters. So if you don't have boron, you don't have phosphorus, you don't have thorium, you don't have uranium, these are elements that are Achilles' heels in a lot of industries that are required to have high purity quartz for the manufacturing of their product. That drives the value proposition for this sand. And that sand is not easily obtainable around the world. The deposit in Manitoba is probably the largest high purity scalable deposit in the world.
So how are they going to get it? Where exactly is the sand? What's the plan?
Okay, so here in the Red River Valley, we have loose soil and rocks at the surface, and below that's clay, and below that we have this porous layer of limestone with lots of water. Below that is shale. That's sedimentary rock, brittle, relatively impermeable, and below that's the sandstone aquifer, and that's where Sio Silica wants to go down to. Now, about half an hour east of Winnipeg, this sand sits about 50 meters below the surface. That's close enough to reach by drilling a well, but not so close that taking it out would immediately cause the surface to collapse. Sio Silica wants to drill 16-inch wide wells down into the sandstone layer, pump air into the pipe, and then suck up the sand, pipe it over to a processing facility it wants to build near Vivian in the arm of Springfield, return any water to the ground, and then it's asked the Clean Environment Commission, and that's the provincial environmental regulator, to approve a plan to dig up to 7,200 of these wells over the next 24 years across a big arc of southeastern Manitoba. They drill about 300 of these wells a year, operate each well for 5 to 7 days. Now, all in all, Sio Silica would take up to 33 million tons of sand out of the aquifer. Brent Bullen calls this sustainable mining because the surface doesn't get scarred. He said the economic impact to Manitoba would be in the billions.
I just want to repeat the big numbers. The plan, 7,200 of these wells in the next 24 years.
Yeah, across an area that stretches from east of Winnipeg to down south, and they also have mining claims south of Winnipeg too.
You mentioned them, what does the Clean Environment Commission have to say about this?
Okay, well, nobody's done this before, at least not on this scale anywhere on the planet. So the commission sought advice from experts in geology, hydrology, engineering, and some of them raised concerns. 3 consultants for the firm KGS Group wrote a report saying all these wells could punch so many holes in that shale barrier between the two aquifers that the water from the limestone aquifer could mix with the water in the sandstone aquifer. And they wrote, quote, there will certainly be an exchange of groundwaters between the aquifers. There will be an irreversible change where mixing of these two aquifers will occur, unquote. Other engineers note Sio Silica has done some modeling for what would happen to the groundwater, but didn't conduct any large-scale testing, and they aren't factoring in, they say, what could happen if some of the thousands of wells are built improperly or fail. And some experts also expressed concern about a chemical called polyacrylamide leaking out of the processing plant. Charles Boutin, a chemist employed by the commission, wrote, quote, since groundwater is the main source of potable water for thousands of Manitobans, a precautionary approach is important, unquote.
So, Bartley, who uses the groundwater we're talking about as drinking water?
Well, there are thousands of drinking water wells that reach down into either of these aquifers, and tens of thousands of people rely on it. Bradley Simmons is one of them. He lives in the arm of Springfield, a few kilometers west of the processing plant that Sio Silica wants to build. He has 150 acres of land, most of it rewilding forest. He's opposed to Sio Silica's mining proposal because he's worried about his drinking water.
My biggest concern is it's never been tried before. The science has never been tried, and it getting approved for 25 years seems like a long time. And for something that has never been done before, why couldn't we just do a couple years, trial purposes, test the well water, see what happens underneath us, which we just don't know. There's too many unknowns.
Simmons is one of hundreds of people who made submissions to the Clean Environment Commission during hearings in February and March, and they're all concerned about the drinking water. Some are worried about subsurface collapses. In 2020, they organized an opposition group called Our Line in the Sand. Tanji Bell is the president, and she lives northwest of the proposed facility.
This project shouldn't even be considered. It is taking place directly in the only freshwater drinking source for southeast Manitoba. It is pristine. We look at all of the chemical analysis of it. It surpasses Canada's water guidelines. What are we doing? We should know better at this point in our lives to sacrifice, and they're asking us to sacrifice this water for decarbonization plans.
So now that we've heard the concerns, what does Sio Silica have to say about what the concerns are from experts and residents?
Brent Bullen says there are already 20,000 wells into the aquifers, and a few thousand more won't result in a noticeable change. He says some residents are being fed misinformation, and he insists Sio Silica's technology is less experimental than opponents claim.
What we've done is we've taken existing technologies and we've just applied them in a different manner. So it's when you say it's unproven, it's not that it's unproven, because the production of sand out of a water well has been proven, and it's just we do it on a sustainable platform. So my argument is we've patented an application in a process of an existing technology, and we just happen to be the first to patent it.
I also spoke to some of the politicians in the affected area. Bob Lagasse is the progressive conservative MLA for Dawson Trail, which encompasses the Vivian area where the processing facility would go. And he said he pushed behind the scenes to have Sio Silica's plans come before the Clean Environment Commission because this hasn't been done before. Patrick Therrien is the mayor of the RM of Springfield, and he acknowledges there's tension between economic development and the environment, and that'll come to a head when the Clean Environment Commission makes a decision.
This will be difficult. Of course, there's going to be people that are not happy with either decision that comes out from the CEC, and we just have to be prepared one way or the other.
But this isn't just about water. There are also people living close to the proposed processing facility. And Georgina and Josh Mustard live on 116 acres right next door to what used to be a forest. It's now an empty clearing south of Vivian. They have 8 kids. And Georgina Mustard says she doesn't relish the idea of living next to an industrial site.
If this goes through, it's obviously going to affect us first, but it is going to affect thousands and thousands of people. But for us in particular, you know, we bought this place to secure for our family and our kids, and I don't want to talk about grandkids anytime soon, but I mean, that could be a possibility too. And if this goes through and things go wrong, then what? Then we have to leave? We have to uproot everything we know?
So what exactly did the Clean Environment Commission decide? Well, it published its final report in June of 2023, expressing concern about the risks to groundwater. Out of that, it made 8 recommendations to the province to get better scientific understanding of the risks and also to secure stronger oversight before issuing a license. The then Environment Minister, Kevin Klein, said his office would review the Commission's proposal. But a few months later, his government lost the provincial election to Wab Kinew's NDP. What happened with Sio Silica back in October 2023 in that transition period between governments is now under the microscope, as explained again by Bartley Kives.
So they had an environmental license before the province, and it was being looked at, and then the election happens, and the PCs lose power. And Wab Kinew reveals in December of 2023, a couple of months, that, hey, you know what? The PCs actually were trying to get that approved during that caretaker period where, and you've probably heard about this, but that's the period when governments aren't supposed to make major or significant decisions. They're just supposed to sort of keep the lights on and keep things moving. Anyway, Kinew says this, and then former PC cabinet ministers Kevin Klein and Rochelle Squires, they back him up. And the ethics commissioner looks into it, and he finds out that actually during those 2-week period, Sio Silica was heavily lobbying for approval, and that Stephenson, Cullen, and Warden, as you mentioned, actually tried to get administration at least to look at it, to consider approving it. And of course, it didn't happen. Later on, the province, the NDP government did turn down that application, and then the PC's former cabinet ministers, they did pay their fines. So Sio is back right now with a new application. And now Kinew says, well, we would like to have a public inquiry into what happened back in 2023.
Why? Why is he saying that?
Well, Kinew says not everyone was forthcoming with the ethics commissioner and suggested that he wants to know more about the motives of the people involved. That's something the ethics commissioner could not do in his report. And here's what Premier Kinew told Ian Fraze, my colleague, during a year-end interview on Friday.
Like, why did they do this? The ethics commissioner, the conflict of interest commissioner, was not able to answer that, partially because he's not able to look into financial holdings and stuff like that. These people made representations, but the commissioner also found that pretty much all of them lied in their hearings. So that's something that needs to get addressed.
Kinew also said that the inquiry would look at provincial rules governing lobbying.
The lobbying framework is pretty weak in our province relative to other provinces. So how do we maybe get answers on what happened in the Sio Silica affair, but also how do we look ahead to the future and just have a stronger framework? We are going to probably bring in new lobbying rules. We are going to bring in rules around people participating in inquiries from other provinces and things like that. But I'm sure that there's more that needs to be done.
Did he say when this inquiry would happen?
Well, he said it could start as soon as 2026, and he's already looking at terms of reference and looking to hire a commissioner to do this. He says this could take 2 or 3 years and maybe even wrap up before the next election, which is slated but not written in stone for 2027. Now, this would be the third inquiry Kinew's promised to call. The other two are the police headquarters construction and procurement inquiry, which is underway. Those hearings are supposed to start in February. It's slated to start in February. There was a pandemic inquiry he announced, but that's on the back burner, and it's probably not going to happen based on comments the Premier made last year. So the Sio Silica inquiry comes up while Sio is trying to get that license that I mentioned again. And this information could come back, whatever is found here, before the next election.
What do the experts have to say about this?
Well, I spoke to Paul Thomas, and he's a professor emeritus of political studies at the University of Manitoba. And he says the Sio Silica was, in his words, a sleazy set of events, but he questions the need for an inquiry. And he has 4 reasons. For starters, Thomas said this would be primarily a political exercise that would allow Canoe to continue his claims that the PCs are corrupt. That's something he says often this fall during question period.
We've already heard the ethics commissioner say the stricter new conflict of interest laws were violated. And we've also learned that the constitutional convention of a caretaker period, when governments don't make major decisions before a new government takes office, that was also done. So where's this inquiry leading in legal terms? The critics of the government will say this is a fishing expedition to get behind the scenes into the private financial affairs of some very prominent conservatives.
When a conservatives such as board members of Sio Silica. Now, that was Paul Thomas, and he also raises a concern that Sio Silica is right now in the midst of seeking approval again for an environmental license.
From the government standpoint, probably an inquiry it might be intended to give them some cover if they have to say no to a project coming forward again.
So Thomas also raises a legal concern. He says the legislature and its committees cannot look into the Sio Silica affair now that the ethics commissioner has already done so. Now, Thomas says an inquiry could go ahead in what he calls a strict legal sense, but it might be subject to challenges over double jeopardy for the principals involved. Now, he also brings up a 4th concern, and that's money. Thomas says an inquiry could cost about $2 million, and that's for a government that's really struggling to control expenses. I mean, we just saw last week the provincial deficit for this fiscal year is now projected to be $1.6 billion, and that's like more than double what was in the budget.
While we wait to see whether the province actually pursues an official inquiry, residents of southeastern Manitoba still have a lot of unanswered questions. Questions about their communities and questions about their future. As Bartley mentioned, in early 2024, Premier Wab Kinew announced that his government would reject the Sio Silica bid for a license to bring its plan to reality.
We made this decision after careful review of the environmental risks and the proposed economic impacts on the province. We reviewed the Clean Environment Commission's report. We spoke with department experts. We listened to the concerns of the community. And after careful consideration, we decided to say no to Sio for 2 important reasons. First, we will always put the health and safety of Manitobans front and center in our decision making. And in order for Manitobans to be healthy now and for generations into the future, we have to protect a clean, safe, and healthy environment. That's for us today, for our children and grandchildren tomorrow. Second, the business case of this project does not outweigh the serious environmental risk this project poses and the impact it could have on the drinking water of this community and many others in the region. The technology that Sio is proposing to use is a new method of extraction. With this unproven approach, we cannot guarantee the safety of drinking water for future generations in this part of Manitoba. For these reasons, we are saying no to Sio and refusing the license today.
That decision brought relief to worried residents like Georgina Mustard, who felt they'd been heard after months of stress and advocacy.
A lot of sleepless nights, wondering what our future looks like for our kids, if we're going to have to split up and move. But I'm glad it's all over now, and everything's going to be okay.
But it's not all over yet. Remember at the beginning, I mentioned it's a winding road. The Premier is actually open to sand mining. While he didn't approve Sio Silica's bid for a license, that same week he said yes to another company's plan to mine sand in Manitoba. As for Sio Silica, it focused its efforts on getting other communities on board. It held consultations with a council made up of the leadership of 7 southern Manitoba First Nations, including Broken Head, Peguis, Roseau River, Anishinaabe, and Long Plain First Nations. At roundtable sessions with Broken Head, members were offered an equity sharing opportunity with a value of millions of dollars every year. They turned it down. The company then launched a new marketing campaign with the slogan, quote, 15 billion tons of opportunity, stay in Manitoba, build the future, end quote. Then it doubled down on arguments that silica could play a role in national security and the Elbows Up movement for bolstering Canada's economy by making the most of our resources. In October 2025, Sio Silica pitched another new proposal.
The NDP government nixed a previous one last year over concerns that removing sand from an aquifer would reduce the quality of drinking water and cause collapses underground. Sio Silica President Carla Devlin says the new proposal addresses these environmental fears.
We understand the concerns of community and of the new incoming government.
The new plan calls for drilling fewer wells over the first 5 years over a smaller area southwest of Vivian in the arm of Springfield. Sio Silica also plans to remove less sand over these first 5 years. Mining opponent Tanji Bell said she's not buying this.
This is a project that remains the same. They plan to mine in the same location, which is Manitobans' drinking water.
Bell urged the province to reject the new proposal. Premier Wab Kinew is non-committal.
It'll go through the process.
Carla Devlin says she's confident the Kinew government will have an open mind about mining sand.
I think that they have to recognize that there is a global shortage looming in high purity quartz silica, and we have the largest deposit in the world with the highest purity in the world. Therefore, it's inevitable that the resource will come out of the ground.
Sio Silica says it hopes to gain approval for its new license before the spring of 2026. Bartley, Kives, CBC News, Winnipeg.
We'll see what happens in the new year. That's it for today. I'll be back with another new episode next week. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for listening.